much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, and I love all of you too. All right, welcome to Freewheeling Friday. Thanks for watching. All right, so, I'm going to try to go a little bit over today because I do have to shorten it, just get this out of the way for YouTube and locals and maybe Rumble too, but I'm not sure yet. Definitely YouTube and locals members. I'm going to do something else throughout the weekend because I have to, there's a lot to talk about here. So I have to do more than what I have time to do today. I don't even want to get into it. It's tough. I mean, you know what? I'm proud of her. She's committed. I have a daughter who is like committed to competitive dancing. And that means like dance mom level travel plans. It's ridiculous. But what are you going to do as a parent? They have something healthy they grab onto that can actually better their life with. You encourage it if you can, right? All right, so there you have it. Laura will be here shortly because of that. She's getting ready for them to go. And it'll be just me and the boys this weekend again. And it'll be a rowdy episode, but we're going to do it. All right, couple of things right off the bat. This is reminding me of 2016. There is a lot of third party and a lot of others. It's very common for this to happen in presidential matchups when it's still very early. However, this looks like a lot to me. All right. And it's not candidate specific. We have to talk a lot more about what I started to talk earlier in this week about, which is how badly Joe Biden is doing for an incumbent president, not only in the general election, because he is doing badly in the general election, even when he's leading some of the GOP hopefuls. But he's doing historically abysmal in the Democratic nomination polling. This is worse than Herbert Walker Bush in 1992. This is worse than Jimmy Carter, who had to fend off Ted Kennedy. This is an untold story that is brewing in the 2024 election. At the end of the day, Democrats, because the White House, as we read the other day from The Atlantic and from Politico last week, Democrats have the White House, and the White House can insulate the incumbent. They can scare people away from running against the incumbent president. Most of the establishment thinks Joe Biden beat Trump, and Trump's likely to be the nominee. So, it's just smart to have Joe Biden as the nominee. As we will show you today, if that's the scenario they expect, it's not a very smart one. Primaries are bad for incumbents. Competitive primaries in their renomination is bad. Historically, it hurts. It hurt Jimmy Carter. It hurt Walker Bush. But I don't know how much choice some of these people have when you look. We went over the Trump or bust vote. There's a vote, a Democratic vote, that Democrats they're just not going to nominate some of these people. Or at least it doesn't look like it. If you nominated an RFK, you'd have a completely new coalition. It'd be a real problem for Donald Trump. It'd be a problem for any Republican nominee. You nominate, we're going to get in. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. But the bottom line is, looking back at the tracking that we did in 2016, it was always like high 30s, low to mid 40s if somebody was really a rock star. If third parties don't put legitimate or credible or what is even the word? Substantial candidates forward that get on the ballot across the country, then maybe this will whittle down. But as of right now, there's a big opportunity for a historic third-party vote. And it doesn't matter if Biden's the nominee or someone else is the nominee. It doesn't matter if Trump's the nominee or someone else is the nominee. I think there's just an anger, and there's still large undecided, but I think there are people who are just like, the hell with both of them. On the Republican side, there's a Trump or bust vote, which is not, you don't see it with other candidates. There will always be candidates who say, I'll vote for Nikki Haley, but I'll never vote for another Republican. That's going to happen. That's how statistics works. It's just statistically insignificant. Hell, even with Ron DeSantis, it's still only 3%. If it's not Ron DeSantis, then I'm going to vote I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote at all. The question of whether they'll vote for the other party's nominee or third party is totally separate. All right, let's get into this stuff. Let's start with a little caveat. This is the registered voter. The likely voter doesn't really change the margin between the candidates, which is it was a little bit strange, and we'll go over the likely voter more on the weekend. But it does change the total support level. So if Biden is at 38 against one of the candidates, then with the likely voter model, maybe he's at 42, 43. It increases their support and decreases the undecideds, because we know about, we know there are going to be these hangers that are, just unsures until the end, and then they don't vote. But right now, and we're going to take a look at it in a second. Right now, voter enthusiasm and voter interest, likelihood, and I didn't put up vote history yet, but I will, is significant when you take it all together. And it's suggesting that even this early, it's suggesting a very, very big presidential turnout, bigger than 2020, which was big. And honestly, the polling, contrary to most of the polling, Gallup, us, suggested it may be a little bit more than 2016, but not, 180 million votes. This could be huge. Huge. But I guess it all depends on how it plays out and who gets nominated. So enough of me yapping. Let's take a look at this. If you refresh your screen, all right, for those who have the crosstab link, and YouTube members, you got it. If you didn't get it, you got it in the community comments section. So you're definitely able to see these ahead of time before everybody else. And then locals, of course, you are as well. If you refresh them, you will see both in the column section, the column variables. You'll see now the social bias indications are in there, as are voting likelihood, voter enthusiasm. All right. And likelihood is as likelihood is defined or explained as a probability. All right. So you're certain to vote. You could just take that as like you're 100% certain to vote, or very close to it. Likely to vote, you are greater than 50-50. More likely than not is likely. All right. Unlikely to vote is greater than 0, but less than 50-50. And certain not to vote is obviously 0. We're keeping people in here right now. This, again, is the registered voter sample. Things will change when it's likely. And the primaries have a different crosstab, which, again, you will see over the weekend. All right. I mean, I'm going to tell you some of it now anyway. Again, we had Trump not as high as others, between like 43 and 52 was the highest months ago, before he dipped back down to where he was. Actually, 43 was his low. It was a little bit after the midterms. All right. And he had on one day in the survey, he had a 60-day day, which pulled up what was like his 45 to 48 range. The 60 pulled it up. So then you can anticipate where he's going to generally end up. All right. Ron DeSantis was as high as 29. He has fallen. You know what it is? It's significant. It is. If you think of just outside the sampling error, it is significant. All right. Voting likelihood. Let's take a look at that. All right. First and foremost, a couple things obviously going to jump right out at you. Listen, when women tell you they're likely to vote, you can't count them out. So you can obviously see there's a big disparity here, fairly big disparity between men and women, about 9 points. All right. But there's also about a 7-8 point disparity. 7 point disparity among, no, I was right the first time. among men and women who are likely to vote. So believe me, men may have a slight edge and end up being like 48% of the electorate, which is what we have them at here. But I don't think they'd be a much, much bigger percentage, even though this certain to vote is very clear. The enthusiastic numbers, men are much more enthusiastic. Extremely and very are really, the only thing that is significant to me. You can see men are almost 10 points more significant, about 9.5 points. And when it comes to very, they're slightly more, but not statistically significant. By age group, this is something that could help somebody. Well, it helps Republicans in general, but also helps DeSantis in the likely voter model for the GOP nomination, because we see this as well. This idea, like I've addressed before, Glenn Greenwald's like, well, that's why he's pointing to opinion polls showing that younger Republican voters especially, are non-intervention voters. And God, no wonder why the foreign policy establishment is scared of DeSantis. Those voters aren't DeSantis voters. They are 100% Trump voters. I'm going to show that to you. It's not even close. So I don't know if he just didn't know that, or if he's trying to push a narrative, because I've seen that narrative before. But DeSantis's vote is a senior vote. All right. And it is I don't want to even say moderate, but a traditionalist vote. All right. Somebody said something on locals when I put this up that I think is a very good observation. All right. Basically, to me, it looks like a Bush-like coalition. And depending on what Democratic turnout might be in 2024, that could be an utter disaster for Republicans, because you're looking at like a Romney kind of coalition as well. It's just that Romney did not win. He didn't drive out. Bush at least drove turnout up in his reelection. Romney was not at all motivational. And no, these voters don't vote for technocrats. They don't like them. They don't vote for the Republican consultant class. They don't like them. All right. So it does look like it, though, on paper, but you really got to get them all out. When we were showing, and just another word, here's, the crosstabs, the charts I was showing on locals, I got 1 or 2 support messages that said, this is ineligible. I can't read this. I don't understand this. I'm showing you on the back end what I see in the raw as it comes in. So Trump support among evangelicals, 77%, 77 plus percent, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but DeSantis was closer, 66, and I actually think he can, increase that. But if you're going to win a state like Wisconsin, if you're a Republican, if there's not a complete turnout disaster for Democrats, it's really 2 parts when it comes to evangelicals. You have got to rack up those kind of numbers that Trump racks up when it comes to the margin, but you also have to drive them out so they're a much larger share of the electorate than somebody like, say, George W. Bush did. There was a lot of talk about that, but the truth is Trump crushed Bush's numbers with evangelicals. That's why Trump wins Iowa by almost 10 points and Bush wins by a few thousand votes. Big difference. All right. So just again, let's look at party before we move out of the voter, because I'm trying to move pretty quick here. We'll condense it first. All right. As you can see, Republicans are more enthusiastic, and they are also much more likely. They're more enthusiastic, and they're more likely or more certain to vote than Democrats. All right. And taken together, Democrats are 2 points more likely, just likely in and of itself as it's defined, but Republicans are 3 points more certain. All right. So, would I think this is a giant? No. That's why I wrote what I wrote on locals. With some of these candidates like Nikki Haley, I didn't even put up yet. It's just not at all competitive. She's double digits down. It's a bloodbath. And you would need a monstrous depression among Democrats for her to win. It's just not going to happen. All right. Independents are where independents usually are, below both parties. All right. By education is another thing I want to show. All right. You can see here high school or less. Why is it only 70 when it's true? Postgrads are typically more likely, and 4-year college graduates are more likely, more certain. and even more, enthusiastic at some points, but not this time. Why are they hedging the non-college vote? It depends who gets nominated. It really is that simple. Because you can cross it with, I'm not sure I'm going to vote at all. Or I could vote for the other party's nominee or third party nominee. You'll see it when we get there. All right. So let's just take a look. Again, registered voters, big net here. So a lot of people are like, how is Biden's approval so high? It's a registered voter sample. I intentionally didn't want to, miss people casting the net. Right track, wrong track improved somewhat this month. 60% still say it's headed on the wrong track, but 30% now say it's headed in the right direction. That's up about 10 points. And this is down about 10 points. So, while it's still negative 30, it's not negative, oh my God, that's a historic disaster. As you can see, older voters are more pessimistic about the direction of the country, as are younger voters. All right, which isn't a bit of a surprise. We know that. Hey, Laura. Laura's back. Yes, can you please? I left it on because I thought I needed it a little bit more. Whites are more pessimistic than any other race. All right. Although you can see blacks are more than Hispanics in this one, which is Hispanics are slightly positive, which people I know it's again, registered voter, and it does matter. All right. Strongly approved 19%. That's it. 25% somewhat approved, a grand total of 43.6% that have that approve of the job President Biden is doing. But his strongly disapproved is still pretty high. It's almost 40%. The somewhat disapproves hurt Republicans in the midterms. Those people usually vote against the incumbent, and in some cases they didn't. For some reason, they told us in the rematches they would vote for Trump, but they weren't sure they were going to vote for the Republican. And guess what? That happened. So again, 16% somewhat disapprove, 37.3% strongly disapprove, for a grand total of 56.6%. It's bad, it's still negative 10. That strongly disapprove is still pretty high. I saw the AP poll. They said he's dipping down near his historic low. I don't know what to tell you. We found him tick up a little bit. Everybody's a little bit different. All right, let's just get to the head-to-heads. I hate speeding through this like this, but I want to leave time for a little bit deeper dive. So I'm trying to just get through the top lines of things real quick. You know what? Before we go on, you can see actually that let me get more into these groups. You can see that there are some young voters that really have a problem with Joe Biden now. All right. Of course, the older age groups are the least favorable of Joe Biden, but there's some real problems here with groups, demographic groups that are supposed to be core constituencies of the Democratic Party. And we're 25 to 29s. It fell off the map for this guy. They're among the worst groups for him. 18 to 24 still are not. And by the way, watch both of these groups when we look at the presidential matchups. Obviously, whites have the, worst opinion of Joe Biden than anybody else. But when you have 30% black disapproval, that's like Rasmussen numbers. We didn't even have that. I'd have to go back and look, but I thought we were just like nearing 20 and we were having a knip, over it. But there you have it. All right, so I just wanted to show that. And that may explain some of it. But let's get to Trump v. Biden, the rematch. Again, in the registered voter, and I'll just tell you right now. All right, in the registered voter, it's Trump +4, but it's 42-38. In the likely voter, it is still Trump +4. It's just they both bump up about 2 points, if memory serves. Don't bend my arm if it's 4.5 or something, but that's the way it's shaken up to be. Real quick, voting likelihood, you will see why some of that is. 44 to 39. It isn't, going to be Trump +5. I believe it is Trump +4. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't want to confuse anybody right now. And the likely is not much different. All right. So let's get to some of these groups. And actually, unlikely is still Trump. Uncertain not to is still Trump, although it's very small. So it almost doesn't matter. Let's go to all, and I'll just scroll across. All right. Okay. Trump is doing slightly worse with seniors than DeSantis, but so much better with every other age group. Okay. Obviously, this is going to whittle down, and I would suspect a lot, obviously, is going to go to Joe Biden. But if you break it down, it's the 18 to 24 that really hurts Trump. That's where he's not performing well. In the 25 to 29, he is. I'm talking about comparatively. This just wasn't the case in 2020. Trump had 40 and up, basically. And yeah, he did well in the 30s with some states. But it's interesting because when you look at some of this, it looks kind of close with some of these seniors, right? Especially the 65 to 74. Super seniors go back to Trump, but this age group is not just Trump. It's becoming a problem with a lot of other Republicans. And I think what's simply happening there is people get older. We're having generational shifts. All right. This is not just me for people out there who are doubting this. Nate Cohen just wrote an article in the New York Times about this. Go through everybody else's crosstabs and you will see the same thing. Working young people specifically, he is doing very well with. When he did not in 2020. He did not. He was, most of his support was coming from 40 and above. Now, 18 to 45, if you were African American, 18 to 45 specifically, that was the group that Trump was doing well with. But, there we have it. Times are different. Things change, folks. I always tell you the same thing. The only thing you can count on being consistent about a political coalition is that it consistently changes. That's the only thing you can count on. All right, let's scroll over, and I should have froze each column, but I didn't. I should have froze the start of the column row, but I'll show you. This is Trump. This is Biden. This is third. Note, that Trump is at 30 with Hispanics. There's a lot undecided. It looks, like I said, there's just a lot undecided and a lot third party. But he is doing better than every other Republican candidate with non-white voters. And the same is true, even by the way, of Asians. Black voters, he's doing, we're not one of those polls that have had like ridiculous shares of black vote for Republican candidates. We aren't that. So even though we have Joe Biden's disapproval at 30%, Trump takes about 17% of the African-American vote. Keep your eye on that when we get to the other Republicans. All right. And also, by the way, whites are damn near splitting in some of these matchups. If you're a Republican, you just can't win like that. You've got to win white voters. All right. Again, this is detail. So if you want to look in more detail, but some of them, we always group it because some of them are just such a small, group, guys. It's so small of a sample. It's not significant. All right. Crossover surprised me. Trump is actually, for all the talk we hear, oh my God, he scares away all these Republican suburbanites. He's losing about 9% of them, which everybody is. All right. And the difference is that he's actually taking more Democrats again. This looks again more like 2016. In 2020, in the national polling we did for the Epoch Times, this was not the case. Democrats were basically universal behind Joe Biden. And also, it's worth noting that when we did head-to-head matchups, and then we also did governors and senators going into the midterm, the Senate candidates and the gubernatorial candidates were in the very low single digits, low to mid single digits, and Trump was doing better with them. So I 100% believe it. All right, independents, Trump carries by about 5. And interesting here, actually, if you get into detail, he's carrying independents as well, but there's a small share of third-party vote. This really hurt him in 2020, and we had it about 3 to 1, 2 to 1, because they were so small. It could range. It could really get whack. But if we did like the Rust Belt battleground poll, we would get a pretty big sample of them, and it was like 5. I think at least what was it? Iowa, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So 6 states. We had a pretty big sample out of that. And, he's getting crushed with those voters. And that's not happening now. Moving on, let's get to education. All right. High school, it's obviously a lead for Donald Trump. DeSantis does better with 4-year college voters. Undergrads, bachelor's degrees, whatever. but he's not doing as well with post-grads. There's no real big difference there. He's not doing as good with voters who have some or an associate's degree, some college or an associate's degree, and he's not doing as well with high school or less. And by the way, well, I'm going to hold off on that. By income, if you are filthy rich, you vote for Biden. We're not even filthy rich, but you know what's interesting? If you nest these and you like take somebody who doesn't have a college education but makes a lot of money, they're Trump voters. What does this for what makes this closer or throws it to Biden altogether is that this is a particularly educated group in the sample, and it is in general. But ironically, Trump is carrying every working income bracket. All right. Basically splitting. He's got like a 2-point lead on Biden with 100 to 200,000, and Biden leads with 200,000 or more. All right. Employed full-time is actually kind of close. Part-time is Biden. Unemployed but looking is Trump. Unemployed but not looking, quitting on the American dream, is Trump. Disabled is Trump. Biden gets the students. Trump gets the retirees. All right. I don't want to spend too much time. Let's see what else is noteworthy. Trump does better with unions, although, of course, he is losing them. He does better with union voters than other Republicans, especially what was weird to me was public sector. Now, it's possible private is a smaller sample, but this is closer. Biden started crushing. In 2016, Trump did much better with union voters than Republicans typically do against Hillary Clinton. But Biden took them back pretty, decisively in 2020. And now it's looking close again. All right. Married is Trump. Hell, it's basically, widowed is Trump. Divorced is Trump. Separated is basically even, but slightly Biden. Come on, let's move it along. And single is Biden. If you have if you have kids over the age of 18, you're a Trump group. If you have school-age children, you're barely a Trump group. If you have children who are about to enter school, you are significantly a Trump group. And if you don't have children at all, you are slightly a Biden group. Military is Trump. Veteran is Trump, even more than military is, by the way. And if you're not a veteran, you're still slightly for Trump. Protestants, overwhelmingly Trump. Catholics, basically tied. Biden +1. That's a disaster for Democrats or for any Democrat. Muslim is Biden. Jewish is Biden, one of the most liberal religious groups out there. Another religion is basically tied. No religion is slightly Biden. Again, Trump is getting about a third of the urban vote. This is higher than other Republicans. DeSantis gets a quarter. Both DeSantis and Trump carry suburbanites. The difference is the vote share is a little bit higher for both Trump and Biden here. So when you look at that, you'll see the difference. And Trump does better in rural America than DeSantis does. Trump leads slightly in the Northeast. It's even. There's a lot of third parties and a lot of undecideds. This is because of Trump's strength in Pennsylvania and Maine. And again, maybe, I'd have to look. They're just small samples. So I hate to look at, but in Maine, he was like crushing it. But it was such a small amount of voters. Typically, Democrats get that though. So, I notice things like this. The Midwest is Trump. By the way, Biden leads DeSantis in the Northeast. He leads DeSantis by 2 points in the Midwest. DeSantis leads in the South, which Trump also does. And Biden leads both of them in the West, although it is closer with Trump. All right. Let's keep going. Voting likelihood, Trump leads by 5 among those who are absolutely certain to vote, and it's basically even among those who are likely to vote. All right. Well, Rich, then why is it, well, because again, it's a registered voter. This is the registered voter result. We will do the likely voter, and we'll talk about it, but that's where we're at. Trump is killing him, and those who are extremely likely, they're about tied, and those who are very likely. But listen, you don't count out some of these other ones, even though this is all that's really ever significant to me. You just don't count out. Like if there are a bunch of women who tell you that they're not stoked about voting, but they are certain to vote, and they're moderately enthusiastic, folks, they're going to vote. If they have the vote history to back it up, they're going to vote. All right, so you can actually see here something weird happening. On social bias when it comes to family, Trump is now leading among those who are still very comfortable. And the question's not here. We'll have to look at it on the rows. But the question basically is worded as follows. Where are you? It's not going to let me. You kidding me? That stinks. Oh, on the rows it will, though. Hold on. And net calculations, rebasing, no, edit variable. All right. So if I edit, I can read it. How comfortable or uncomfortable are you telling each group of people about your political beliefs, such as how you intend to vote? So, like, how honest you're going to be with these people, right? This is different. Very comfortable is now a Trump group. That's strange. While the uncomfort ones, the uncomfortable ones from somewhat to very are still Trump groups. Weird. That's a change. And those of you who have been following the Public Polling Project for a while, this is a change. Same is true of friends. The same is true of neighbors. The same is, a little 1 point less of coworkers. We're now getting at a little bit more uncomfortable groups, right? But look, strangers and pollsters are always the worst one, and it's still the case. Trump still leads among those who are very comfortable and very uncomfortable. Friggin' weird, right? Or not weird. It's just that it's noticeable, and we need to pay attention. We absolutely need to pay attention to this because this was just not the case. All right. Let's see. What do I want to do here? I think, frankly, my battery on my laptop's about to die. But I think I want to take a real quick break, and we can get through the break. And if we do, then we can go back to doing a whole bunch of other stuff. All right. Because I'm going to try to stretch a little bit here. But I'm going to cram as much as I can into an hour regardless. Laura said to tell you Monday we will leave a lot of question time. But the truth is we're going to have some stuff over the weekend. So hopefully we'll get them in there. All right. So let's take a quick break. And when we do, we'll look at DeSantis's numbers and then some of the other stuff in the poll. All right. Why is China hoarding food? Experts say China's hoarding a massive amount of food, and they'll soon have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half of its rice, and half of its wheat. But when asked about it, China lies. One China expert says, of course, they'll never admit to doing something like that. Well, what does China know that the rest of us don't? When it comes to global food shortages, China's the canary in the coal mine. And you see they're the number one importer globally. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed. So they can't afford to mess up. Or there will be riots, civil panic, or worse when 1 billion people can't eat. What does that mean for Americans like you and I? 2 words, food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on the best-selling 4 Patriot Survival Food Kit like Laura and I have done for our family. They're hand-packed in the US of A. The kits are compact. They stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And their 5-star reviews on the website, folks, rave about the flavor and taste. I don't have to do it for them. It's all right there. Right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase of the 4 Patriot Survival Food by typing in the code TPP10 at checkout. Again, go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10 to get 10% off your first purchase at 4 Patriots Survival Food. Again, I always tell you guys this. When you go to do it, absolutely, if you're going to get that 3-month kit, use the promo code for that 3-month kit. It's the best deal, hands down, on the site. But not only that, when you do, you will also get a bunch of gifts that come along with that free kit, with that 3-month kit. And I strongly recommend that you check out what you get before you get anything else. Again, 4patriots.com, promo code TPP10. All right. All of these other diets Laura and I have tried were garbage. They're junk science is what the doctor called it. And that's because they use they use extracts of common produce department fruits and vegetables that have few health benefits. You're better off going to the store. I take Field of Greens because it's the whole organic fruit and vegetable, not a watered down supplement. And it's backed by their Better Health promise. Each ingredient in Field of Greens was scientifically chosen to support vital organs like your heart, lungs, and kidney health. Others support my immune system, blood pressure, and metabolism. Healthy weight loss. I don't eat as healthy as I should, but that's why I take Field of Greens. Like me, you'll probably look and feel healthier, fast, and have way more energy. Everyone's experience is a little bit different. But the best proof will come in your next checkout when your doctor says whatever you're doing, it's working, keep it up. Get started today with 15% off. Go to fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP. That's promo code TPP at fieldofgreens.com. And again, folks, I got all my little caveats there. If you think you have a benefit after a couple of days, or even after that first, because I did after the first time I had Field of Greens, you think you have a benefit, then keep it up. Don't give up. Keep it up for weeks, and you absolutely will feel the difference. You'll see it in your skin. You'll feel it in your hair. All right, so keep it up. All right, last one I got to tell you about before we move on and get back to the poll. Jam and Bean, our Patriots and our friends over at Jam and Bean. Again, I call them an artist of coffee roasting because they are having an incredible deal right now for the People's Pundit. If you use the promo code TPP40 at checkout when you sign up for a new subscription, you will get 40% off of that initial subscription, and you will still get 10% off the monthly renewals that you always get for being a supporter of the People's Pundit using the code TPP40 at checkout. All right. And those of you who have gotten stuff from Jam and Bean, you've all sent me great testimonials. I love to hear from everyone who gets from Jam and Bean, for Patriots, Field of Greens. We want to hear your feedback, so please do. I see them featuring heavily their popcorn, which I absolutely love. Dill, love it. Buffalo blue cheese. You guys get what you like. You know what you like. But I'll tell you what, they're all delicious. All right. Jam and Bean, JAMN, bean.com. Links in the description. Again, that is Jam and Bean. Use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. All right. And Laura usually does that for me. So let me just do it again. forpatriots.com, promo code TPP10. Field of Greens, promo code TPP. All right. I tried to keep them all separate, but as they offer new deals, you have to change the code. All right. I tried to keep them all consistent. All right. Let's get back to DeSantis's numbers and then the results of some of the other stuff in the poll. All right. Back to it. Here we are. Scoot all the way over. And we could do a little bit of a comparison back and forth here, but all right. So DeSantis is down by 2 to Biden. Biden is lower than slightly lower. In the likely voter, it's actually pretty close, although DeSantis is still down. They both rise, but it is pretty close. However, there are some things that are a little bit concerning. Look at men and look at females. DeSantis is only up by a few points with men, and he's down like a normal Republican is typically down with women. All right. Now, for somebody who's supposed to be chasing away women, Donald Trump is the lead with both men and women. I'm not the only one to find this. Harris found it. Rasmussen found it. So it is real. Also, while you're at it, look at the ages. They're about to change when we go back to DeSantis. That's something. So Trump, who does very well with the 30 to 44, DeSantis is down by about 15. Again, it's early and things can change. I'm just seeing some structural differences here that have to be pointed out. The white vote is actually closer. And among blacks, DeSantis is getting, about 9%, what other Republicans typically get. Hispanics, he's the governor of Florida. He did very well with Hispanics. But as I pointed out, that process was long. It started to happen under Donald Trump. He let the Cuban policy change. He went down there. He courted them. He naturalized Venezuelans. So there were a lot of voters who just weren't eligible to vote for Donald Trump in 2020, even though there was about 70,000+ new Venezuelans who were eligible, who voted like 70+% for Donald Trump. There was another group that came. That's why South Florida was such a big boon to him, but then an even bigger boon to DeSantis. You look at a county like Miami-Dade, they're both going to carry it, but they're not monolithic across the country. And there are difficult parts of the country where Republicans are having a hard time duplicating that success. And that's true of even Texas, where Trump does incredibly well with Hispanics in Texas and other Republicans do not. And by the way, the same is true in California, where he's supposed to be toxic. He is among white people, not non-white people. All right. Among Asians, Trump is getting killed among Asians too, but DeSantis is running behind him even. All right. So where is DeSantis stronger? Super seniors. That's where he's stronger. The 65 to 74 is still kind of tight with DeSantis. It's the super senior. The 40 to 49 is a Biden group where it is not against Donald Trump. All right. And then the 25 to 29 is not about tied. It's not. Biden is carrying it. And it's a big deal because when we look at, I would vote for the other party's nominee or I would not vote. These are the voters that keep coming up over and over again. So, the point is, I believe them. All right. I believe them. And you should too. All right. Race, we did that. By party, as you know, DeSantis is only winning about 8% of the Democratic vote compared to Trump taking low double digits now again, back to 12 like he used to. And Republicans are 10% for Biden, 1% less than they were for Trump. Independents are going for Ron DeSantis by about 3 points, the same, but it's lower. All right. So that crossover and the narrower margin among independents and the softer support among independents makes all the difference in the world. DeSantis is taking third-party voters 2-1 compared to Donald Trump taking them 3-1. True independents are actually pretty much even. All right. Whereas Trump had, maintained that lead with them. I didn't look at ideology before, but DeSantis does fairly well with liberals. I want to say Trump takes like 18% of liberals. Let's see. And notice that Biden takes 10% of conservatives. I think there's a little bit of a difference there, which is indicative of the Trump weirdness. All right, so Trump loses a little less conservative, but he takes 17% of liberals. All right, 30% among moderates to Biden's 43.5. Let's compare that. All right. So it's only a little bit weaker. It's the little bit loss of more conservative vote, literally 1 percentage point, not much, but Trump being able to take some liberals that are weird. It's weird. It's like Ron DeSantis is more likely to have a liberal Republican vote for him in the primary, but Donald Trump is more likely to have a liberal moderate or a liberal independent vote for him in the general. Even, by the way, liberal Democrat. There was a couple of them. I was a little bit shocked. All right, high school or less, you can see DeSantis is winning them, but it is not at all. They're like very undecided. This is the problem. This is that group that may not show up. So even at the end of the day, if all these undecideds go and he winds up winning them by 30 points, if they're 20% of the electorate instead of 28% of the electorate, or I'm giving a difference to exaggerate here, it make all the difference in the world. Some college and associates only going for DeSantis by 5. They're a big group. Why does that matter? It's a big group. It's like 30-something% of the electorate. It's huge. For college, DeSantis does, I think a little bit better than Trump, honestly. I know he does in the primary, but among post-grads, not really. Trump outperforms among post-grads. It's that 4-year college where DeSantis shines. All right? He gets real close. Among incomes, if you're rich, you're still, or I'm saying rich, but $200,000 is not really rich, especially if you have a family. All right, I'm just busting your chops. 200 or more, though, you're a Biden voter. Trump took the 100 to 200 category. DeSantis trails a little. This is where the 50 to 100, DeSantis has his strength, but it's not as strong as Trump. 30 to 50, same story. Under 30 is the difference. So DeSantis trails Biden in the under 30. Trump leads in the under 30. By unemployment, DeSantis trails people who have a full-time job, whereas Biden was splitting them with Trump, basically. Biden leads among part-time workers. Unemployed but looking, where Trump started to take over. DeSantis takes over when it's unemployed not looking. All right? He also wins disabled. He's leading in disabled and retirees. All right. Union, he's getting crushed. It's not like he's getting crushed with union voters. Why does that matter? 1 word, 2 syllables, Midwest. Married, DeSantis leads slightly among married. He's actually trailing Biden among widowed, which is weird. Among divorced, he's carrying divorced voters, separated voters, and losing single voters. No, the difference here is that Trump also carries widowed, and his lead with married is a little bit is bigger. All right. Parental, yes, all over 18 is DeSantis all day. One or more school-aged under 18 is Biden by a significant amount. That's weird. But Trump was about even. It was statistically even. I don't understand why DeSantis is down by 13 points, basically, or 14 points when it comes to people who have kids in school. One or all under 18, but not yet school age. Trump was winning considerably, and DeSantis is down by 8. Or not 8, 7, rounding. All right, so if you round to the nearest whole before you do the math. And among people who don't have kids, it's Biden. All right, which it typically is. I know Laura's giving me the thing. I'm going as fast as I can, Laura. I'm going as fast as I can. Military goes to Biden. That's a problem because Democrats have been winning military in some races, and it's not the way it used to be. But veterans stick with Republicans. Trump was winning the military. DeSantis is losing it. DeSantis is winning veterans, but not by as much. If you're not either one of those, it's a Biden +3, where it was like, I believe, a Trump +1 or 2 or something. DeSantis is winning Protestants, but he is not above 50 with them like Trump is. He's losing Catholics by about 6 points. He is getting crushed with Jews too, but actually doing a tad bit better. The problem is they're 2% of the electorate, 2 to 3%. Muslim getting crushed even worse than Trump, which is weird considering that I'll talk about the Muslim ban. Another religion Trump does fairly well with. That's not working out here. And no religion, secular Republicans like Donald Trump. So he does all right with them. Whereas DeSantis, who is a Catholic, I don't know if that would even matter to them. It just doesn't seem to be working out. DeSantis leads by 3 in the suburbs, like Trump leads by 4, I think it was, or something, maybe 6. I have to go back and look. But again, the vote shares are lower. In urban America, DeSantis gets about a quarter compared to Trump's third. And obviously, DeSantis is winning among rural voters, but he's not winning nearly enough. In the Northeast, where Trump and Biden were basically tied, Biden leads by 8 points. In the Midwest, where Trump led by 2, Biden leads by 2, basically. In the South, where Trump led very, significantly, DeSantis leads by 5, but again, very slow, lower vote shares. A lot of this I'd expect to go to DeSantis. Let me just be clear about that. It's just that you can clearly see it's softer. Some of that could be name recognition. But now he's, we're at a point now where, he's been in the news a lot. So it's not like it was 2 months ago, folks, where I was making excuses. It's getting a little bit harder to make excuses. His name recognition is getting up there. Certain to vote, Biden has, 0.6%. They're basically tied among those who are certain to vote. It's that likely to vote category where Biden would overtake him. All right. Voter enthusiasm. DeSantis' voters are slightly more enthusiastic, extremely enthusiastic, but Biden makes up for it with very. The comfortable. Are you comfortable? It is possible. There's some social bias here. I wanted it, and I'm glad I remember. We used to ask questions like these for years ago. For years, we've been doing it, even though we haven't been doing it publicly in the Public Polling Project. In Florida in 18, DeSantis had a very high bias signal, meaning there were a ton of people who we suspected did not want to admit they were going to vote against a black candidate for governor. And at the end of the day, they would tell us that they do not agree with him ideologically, but they were undecided when in truth, they were not undecided. All right. So like I said before with those undecideds, they don't really know who he is, whatever it may be. The very comfortable is, closer here. Trump was winning that. The very uncomfortable, Trump was also winning, but DeSantis is as well. So there are some indicators here. Let's go over to the goodies, though, which are strangers and pollsters. You can see that Biden's winning the very comfortable when it comes to talking to pollsters, but DeSantis has a pretty considerable, 10-point lead roughly on very uncomfortable. So, could that give him a little bit of a, yeah. The same thing is true when it comes to strangers. Is that good for maybe some support you can't measure? Probably. But, how much? I don't know. Is it a lot? I don't know. I don't think so. All right. Very likely, somewhat unlikely, very unlikely. How likely do you think it is that the Central Intelligence Agency was involved in the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy? We're going to ask this a lot moving forward. If you take the social bias indicators and you cross them with the JFK question, because it's not just about head-to-head matchups, guys. It's not. It's about uncomfortable political questions that you may or may not be comfortable enough and how that maybe they never heard of Big Data Poll. Hey, this is Rich. Hey, this is Mitch. Hey, this is Laura. Hey, this is Matt. Hey, this is whoever, one of the agents from Big Data Poll. Maybe they don't know who it is, and they're like, "That's a friggin' CIA asking me this question, man. I'm not answering this." That's what it's about. So it's worth looking at. But bottom line, again, it is worse for the CIA among likely voters, but among even a big swath of registered voters. And what are we trying to get to here? About 180 million. Maybe more, 185. I kid you not. The voter file is over 200 million now. I'm trying to cast a big old net. Yeah, there's a lot of junk and dirt on it. Absolutely there is. Despite Eric, by the way. Despite the Eric system. It can take me 2 seconds, Governor. 2 seconds to show you who has a change of address flag in your state. You do not need to remain in the ERIC system. But I digress. Very likely, 23%. Somewhat likely, 23.3%. Somewhat unlikely, 13.1%. Very unlikely, 17.8%. You might notice here that the unsure no opinion is through the roof on very uncomfortable. About a third of them are very uncomfortable being honest about their opinions. And this is one of those questions, folks, where, it's worth looking at the cross tabulation. Because I'm willing to bet close to a third of that 23% thinks it's at least somewhat likely. I want to know your thoughts, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. Anyway, bottom line here is only about 31% of Americans think it's at least somewhat unlikely that the CIA did not have a role in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, whereas 46.3% think it's at least somewhat likely, with equal shares thinking that it's very likely and somewhat likely. Very unlikely was only like 5 points ahead of somewhat unlikely. That's not much. But you have very likely and somewhat likely almost identical. What does that tell me? The American public, a plurality at least, if not a very close to, a bare majority, thinks the CIA assassinated former President John F. Kennedy. Don't you think that's worth looking at when it comes to the sound, when we're weighing the soundness of our social contract? When basically half of Americans think that the Central Intelligence Agency whacked the former president? I mean, it's a big deal. That's a big deal. Does anyone actually... Here, let me put some of these comments up. People who believe in magic bullets are delusional. Does anyone actually not believe they killed him? Oswald was obviously a patsy. I'd put that other one up that reflects the other side of this, the pro-CIA side, but I'm afraid that YouTube would have a problem with that. Yeah, I'm curious to see. It's huge, Evan. It's huge. It's huge. That's a massive amount of people. And here's people, obviously, no conspiracy. There are obviously people who think there's no conspiracy. Then you have others who think absolutely they did it. They probably killed RFK too. Sirhan. Man, what do you think? Dan Manchurian-like kind of thing? Is that what you're thinking? I'm telling you. Oops. Go back on with Eric and Mark to discuss your data. Invitation's open. Invitation's open on that. The crowd wants me to go back on Mark and Eric, Laura, to discuss the data on the CIA.
That was super fun.
46.3% think it's at least somewhat likely the CIA assassinated John F. Kennedy, had a role in it. Only 31% do not.
Yeah,
Very likely is 23%.
We can't do this Friday. Next Friday.
Yeah, we can't do this Friday, but we can do it next Friday.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll ask Eric. If it's
I mean, I think a lot of people had this view, Casey. If I had to give an idea of like what it is people who are saying at least somewhat likely or very likely, what they were saying, that basically there's no reason anymore for them to do this other than that it's a major problem. You know, that they know that what's left is obviously going to incriminate them. And that would probably, I would say that that would be the most common heard thing. Like, this should have been out already. The only reason it's not out is because they have something, you know, they had something that they don't want. Yeah, I mean, hey, look, one of the presidential candidates know what's on it. He knows. That's another thing Trump could have done, and he didn't. And that's a valid criticism. Robert and I, you know, like I said, a lot of people are big mad, think that for some reason I'm like over here pushing things. I'm just trying to be the voice who tells the truth. That's it. That's all. And let's face it, the vast majority of establishment media, and you couple that with the influencers now that are being incentivized, you know, it's 80, 90, it's 80, 20, 90, 10 slanted in one direction. And I don't think that direction accurately reflects the opinion of the American public. So when that happens, I tend to get a little defensive of the American public. I do. Admittedly, guilty as charged. So when I see, oh, you know, you have to win independents too, that's not even totally true. Barack Obama lost independents. He drove up Democratic turnout so high, he swamped Mitt Romney and his independent coalition because his independent coalition was on top of a very weak base. The electorate was D +5. Romney got killed anyway, even though he won independents. The truth is you should be doing both. Cernovich is right about that. Independents follow people who have the courage of their own conviction. That's human nature. It's not just independent nature, it's human nature. People who waffle and go back and forth on policy positions because the consultants are trying to tell them how to get to the middle, soften their base, and lose. I don't know what else to say here. Sean Trendy, the case of the missing white voter. After 2012, Republicans are gearing up. Well, that's not true because Trump is leading. And I will give you guys a tidbit on this. Like I said, Trump is usually in the 40s with us. Well, I know other people have had him in the 50s for a while in the nomination polling. He's usually at like 43, 45 with us. His 43 is the low, so I wouldn't say that's fair. 45 to 48 is his norm. That day that he had 60, and it was like a little over 24 hours actually, pulled him up. So he's going to be about 32 points ahead of Ron DeSantis, something like that. Hector, you know what I honestly still think is the best thing for the Republican Party, if I'm being totally objective, is for them to make nicey nice. I really do believe that. Because I think if he was around him, and not around the Karl Roves, you know, and the Paul Ryans, I think he would learn. DeSantis is pretty good at listening, folks. That's part of the problem. It just matters who's around you when you're listening. And the problem has been the beginning since DeSantis was elected in 2018. There's almost nobody. The team is totally different. So I really think that it would still be best if they gotten together. I mean, if they got together and made nicey nice and DeSantis went MAGA, only a softer version of MAGA, I think, look, the bottom line is you absolutely need to move on from Donald Trump if you're the Republican Party. It doesn't look like you can right now because 2018 and 2022. 2024 could wind up looking a lot like 2022. Where, oh, great, you won working class by 30 points. White working class. Not working class. And they were 22% of the electorate, not 25 to 28% of the electorate. And guess what? You didn't do good enough among college grads to offset that anyway. Maybe you got 40% among post-grads. Oh, it's not enough. Maybe you got 47% among four-year grads. It's not enough. We've been with the exit polls now. I mean, not that they're 100% dead on. They're not. But it's even when they're adjusted after the fact. I'm not talking about election day exit polls, which suck. But after the fact, they adjust them. The census always does a great review. So does Pew Research, by the way. Census has verified their study, which is much better. Did you vote? I can see you voted. Great. Got the vote history to prove it. And they, go back and do that kind of an exit poll. That's totally different. And it's very clear. You can do better among educated voters, but it's not good enough if you don't drive this vote out. By the way, like 40% of RFK's voters would not vote for another Democrat. So think about the coalition that's just waiting to be built there. And Democrats don't see it. All right. So over the weekend, we're going to talk more about the weakness of Joe Biden. All right. I know we got a boogie here, but we're going to talk about how historically weak Joe Biden is. I can't believe this isn't a bigger conversation. I know the media is crooked and everything, but for a president to be in the low to mid 30s, and we had him, Michelle Obama, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Pete Buttigieg, Robert Kennedy Jr., not the biggest of the lists. Some of them have had much bigger lists. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris. It's not that we asked 15 different names like some of these other polls. Democrats want a different nominee. Dean Phillips of Minnesota is not being heard by the party establishment. And at the end of the day, if there is a Republican president who defeats Joe Biden, Dean Phillips is going to have some crow to stuff in people's mouths. He better just walk around with crow. Because, yeah, we know it. We know it from history that it's bad. Party primaries, in a presidential renomination is bad for that party. We know that. What we don't know is how bad it is when a president is this low in the nomination polls. We don't know. All right. So with that in mind, I do have to boogie, but we will come back and make this time up this weekend. I promise. All right. Keep an eye out on locals and on, if you're a member on YouTube, I'll send the links out there as well. Likely voters coming your way. Also, primary polling, which is likely coming your way. Samples not that much smaller, but you can get an idea of it. If you go through the registered voter, it's not going to be the same because there is vote history that goes into it as well. But if you look at voting likelihood, then you can get some idea of where the generals will end up. We'll go from there. All right. We'll talk about it in a lot more detail. And thank you, Neil, and everyone for coming on, and supporting us and supporting our sponsors. The links are in the description. As always, best place to follow me is right down there, peoplespundit.locals.com. And we will see you either on later tonight, maybe even, or tomorrow. All right. But we're going to have to talk a lot about this because there's a lot in this poll. Take time, go through it, and keep your eyes peeled for the next one to come. All right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for watching. Have a safe weekend. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreak.